I want to explain why growth, location, and rental demand should always trump chasing a rental yield, particularly in the early stages of building out your property portfolio. Now, don't get me wrong, a rental yield is obviously very important, but it shouldn't be an ultimate deciding factor over whether you buy in a growth location or not. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you now. Okay, so let's say you've gone and bought your very first investment property and you've done the right thing and you've bought in the right location, you bought in a high growth area, and you bought where there is a strong rental demand. The first thing that we want to see out of our property over time is that it is increasing in value. So that's step number one. You want to make sure that the property has potential to grow. And again, location is going to be one of the contributing factors to make sure that your property can grow over time. But when we first buy these types of properties in these high growth locations, the chances are that the rental yield is not going to cover all of the expenses with the property. The first major expense that we are going to have to incur with our property portfolio is interest rates. Now, this blue line represents interest rates. As we've seen over the past couple of years, interest rates can go up, they can go down. There's a whole bunch of different reasons which influence that, which are out of our control as property investors. The cost of money is going to fluctuate through the time of holding the property. In order to hold the property, there are going to be costs, and those costs are going to increase over time. Most notably, insurance premiums are going to go up over time. You're going to have utilities, you're going to have council rates. That is basically going to be driven by inflation, and that's that purple line there. But what a lot of new property investors tend to forget is that rental income almost always outpaces inflation. So what we'll tend to find is that over time of holding our property portfolio, in, for example, the first 1 to 5 years, as I've seen with my own personal portfolio, the property is going to be negatively geared. When you start to get into the 5 to 7 year mark, the property might turn to neutral geared, meaning the rent is equaling the debt repayment and also the cost of holding the particular property. But what I have found after 7+ years, the rent actually outpaces the cost of holding the property and also the debts on the property, even with interest rates being where they are right now at 6.5%, 7%. So that means that over time, if you continue to buy property after property, and let's say you might get to 10 properties, which if you're watching this, you might think is absolutely crazy and impossible to do. That was me, 6 or 7 years ago. It is very possible to get 10 properties in great locations. Now let's say after time, and this is a real life example, each property is then putting $200 per week in your pocket after all of the expenses. Now let's say you have 10 properties. Let's do the maths here. 10 properties is $2,000 a week after all expenses. And if you want to know, that's $100,000 a year after all of the expenses of holding the property, and you haven't actually sold any of the properties. You still have the same assets, they're still growing in value, but it's putting $100,000 a year in your pocket. Now that is why chasing a rental yield in the beginning should not matter. The main thing that you want is to buy the right property in the right location that has a strong rental demand so that your property can appreciate in value over time, so that the rent will consistently increase in value over time. And before you know it, you won't give a shit about interest rates because it's not going to matter because your property is going to cover it all. This is one of the ways that you can make serious coin out of property. You just have to have the right plan. You just have to have the right strategy.